All right, good evening, everybody. Time is 6:30. We'll go ahead and open up public comment. Views expressed by individuals during public comment do not necessarily reflect the views of the city of Fremont and have not been verified for accuracy by the city. As a reminder, city council and staff are not permitted to respond to comments or questions during the public comment period. In accordance with Fremont Municipal Code Section 2-103, public comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person, shall not contain topics included on this evening's agenda. So if you are here and would like to speak, please come and sign in. There's also comment cards in the back. So we'll go ahead and start. Sandra Murray.
Sandra Murray, 1745 North Nye Avenue, Fremont. Fremont has a problem that many citizens and most of our city government seems to be blind to. We continually have been bringing the radical agenda that's being ushered into our state and city to light. Yet it seems that everyone is so numb to pornographic material that they just brush it off like it is acceptable for our children. Why do you, City Council members elected to represent our community, including the safety of children, think it is acceptable for pornographic lewd material to be present in the library and public school for minors? There's a dark evil in our country funded by George Soros with an agenda to brainwash our children and make them the property of the government with garbage literature, if you could call it that. The schools and library via the government are pushing to take our children. This isn't a battle between us and the library. This is a battle for our children's minds. The library is simply a small piece of the problem, and now they are changing their selection policy. The new policy has a facade of appeasing those who have opposed their book choices, yet they are simultaneously making it nearly impossible for any concerned citizen to contest or appeal their book choices. They want us to come to the librarian personally to make a complaint. Well, they will see me there, but it will not be in private. I will expose the stuff to their employees and the public right there in the library. I have no problem with that. Why do they not want accountability? This is our library, paid for by our tax dollars. Those trash books that they continue to purchase are paid for by who? By us, we the people. The arrogance to think that only the librarian, who is paid by the citizens of the city, should have final say in what belongs there is appalling. The whole thing shows that the government of this city does not care about our children. They care about the next election and about their popularity. You on the city council have failed this community. We are going to have to go to the next level of government in order to deal with this. Your actions have spoken louder than words. All I can say is wake up and think about the future of this country and the children in this community. If you don't care, you should step down from your government position and allow someone else who does care to take your place.
Scott Preston.
Scott Preston, 1717 East 12th Street. Last week, the library board approved a revised library policy that will soon come to this council for final approval. Although there are some positives in the revised policy, there remains room for significant improvement, and there are places where it's outright worse than the old policy. But I'll start by pointing out the good things. I liked the creation of a restricted checkout option for kids' cards. Also, I appreciated the removal of references to the American Library Association. And the addition of restrictions on sexually explicit content in the juvenile section was a welcome change. However, I would have liked to have seen some kinds of limits or restrictions on young adult material as well, or at least a way for young adult books containing such material to be automatically moved to the adult collection. Authors and publishers are trying to push the envelope in terms of young adult content, and if the library doesn't have active safeguards in place, the collection will be overwhelmed with content and messaging that does not reflect Fremont's community standards. The restricted cards are nice, but if there are no guardrails when it comes to young adult material, it really diminishes the impact of those restricted cards. When it comes to selecting material, there's still a heavy reliance on outside entities. And while I understand this saves time, how can we be sure that this will provide a balanced collection? This is a biased industry. And if we're using the tools provided by a biased industry to make selections for the library, we're going to end up with a biased collection. The manual is also now attempting to call out the educational requirements of the library director and staff. To me, this is fairly straightforward. There's no reason for that to be called out in the manual. Educational requirements should be included in the job descriptions or job postings if the city wants the library director and staff to have those degrees rather than a certain amount of experience. It appears that the library director is trying to take that choice out of the hands of the people it belongs to by adding these requirements to the manual. The updated book challenge section is a serious downgrade over the previous version. It seems to require an in-person meeting with the director or library staff prior to even receiving a reconsideration request form. This really puts the patron at a serious disadvantage when trying to articulate their concerns in real time. They're being asked to go up against someone who is professionally trained to essentially deny these requests, and it's not a fair fight. Although the library can choose to encourage this step, it should not be a requirement. There's more that needs to be said, but I know my time for today is running out, so I'll have to stop here. I know you all want this controversy to stop, but if the manual gets approved as is, and these bad policies lead to bad books in the collection, you're going to keep hearing from me and from others who want to see our library stand up against an industry that is pushing an agenda on our kids.
Barb Bushy. You have 3 minutes.
Barb Bushy, 2037 East First Street, Fremont, Nebraska. My first thing that I did write down was I invited y'all, a month ago, and I know you can't answer this, to come check out First Street and to consider putting in speed bumps. It just seems like it's getting worse. Motorcycles are terrible, and not the Harleys. Harley people seem to realize that that equipment is expensive and they take care of it. It's the people that are on these, I hate this word, they're called crotch rockets. Well, and they're the ones that, I'm not lying, when they go by, they zoom, and they just absolutely, it's a speedway. It really is. Okay, I'm just addressing this shortly. This is more than just people against people, because it is that. If they want more people to govern or watch what children are checking out at the library, then give them some more money and hire somebody to do this. And if those people that are so against it, let them pay for that. If not, then let the citizens. Thank you.
Brian Villock.
Hello there, Brian Billwalk, 2127 North Broad Street. Two quick things on the Broad Street with the semis. I think a great thing that could answer it real quick is take the mayor and get a nice big van, pick up the council members, put the lawyer in the front seat, go to Burger King, get everyone a hot cup of coffee, and drive from 23rd to about 16th. And you'll go, man, these streets are pretty rough. So that's just a suggestion. On the library, I just kind of think a good time for a recap. So it all started, a concerned grandmother came, was, with the books and pretty heavy for 8 and 9-year-olds and voiced concern. She was then called a Nazi. Fast forwards, I go in there and check things out. No Bibles in the place. I've heard now that there is one. I don't know if there still is a King James. That'd be nice. Anyway, so the controversy, and they're kind of, everyone's voted. And I mean, I don't think anyone's complaining. You guys are going to do, they're going to do what they're going to do. But my question, this is for all of Fremont, is I think we're 3.1 million short. Who's going to pay for that? And then the next thing, I was here last month listening, and there was a nice gentleman here and thought like maybe censoring the speech of people. I think it's great that any citizen could have 3 minutes to once a month to talk. And I just wondered, was that almost like there was pressure put on you guys? Because if you censor people from talking, then they'll still give. So I was kind of wondering on that is, where would the shortcomings? We're millions short on the library. And then possibly donors saying, hey, if you don't silence the people, no more money. So then we might be about 3.5 million short. And so I just think I've never really heard it brought up much, but and it's probably something to think of. Where do we come up with the missing money to finish paying for the library? I know I'd read in the newspaper downsizing possibly some furniture and things like that. That's $3 million, quite a bit. A lot of, people are getting taxed heavy. And so I just wondered if there would ever be discussion or a time or plans where we're going to come up with a short amount of money for the library. And that's really was my main question today. But I do think the Broad Street it's pretty rough. So anyway, just thank you for your time, and we're just hoping, and we have a great city. You guys are doing great, mayor, city council, doing your jobs. But I just think it is important that people do have a little bit of freedom to come voice a concern. And it just seemed last month like it was almost putting pressure on you guys to either, stop the public comments or, and I just didn't know how that went with the fundraising, and whether that was like if you didn't stop the talking, if they would quit giving money, or quite how that worked. So appreciate your time. Thank you to everyone, and just hoping our city doesn't go woke. Thank you.
Okay, for those who just came, we are in open public comment period until 7 o'clock. Any member of the public can speak on any item that's not on the agenda for up to 3 minutes. There's also comment cards in the back. If you wish to speak, there is a sign-up sheet here in the front.
Brad Yerger, 2318 East Fifth Street. I've brought this up for discussion a few times already, and before I start, I would like to support and echo some of the comments that have already been made this evening with regards to the work that the library board and the librarian have been doing relative to library policies. One of the things that's come up in that discussion and several agendas back, the library board and the librarian said that they in fact had omitted certifying for CIPA in accordance with city ordinance rules, and that they would take that to task, and that they now feel that they are certifiable. I would note that they have not brought that report back to you for ratification of their certification. The original one that had no certification on it, you approved or received. They haven't brought this one back to council, and I'd have to wonder why. It's a matter of getting it before you. But in that regard, I have to ask this question. I've been asking of it myself since they said that they certified, and since several requests went to the city with regards to how does the IT department actually go about filtering to perform the certification that the city claims that it's doing. I suggested at the last library board meeting, after the meeting, that perhaps a test of that would be beneficial. That is, if you could pull up at the parking lot of the library where you can have access to the library's website. As long as you have a library card, I understand that you can access the city's website and you can search for whatever. If the CIPA filtering by the IT department truly works, you could test that theory from the parking lot. I encourage you to do so, to see if in fact the content that is being asserted to be filtered for pornographic content, harmful to minors, obscenity, the various things that are required by state and federal law and by definition are truly filtered out of the content for the library. I just ask you to test it. The other thing that goes along with that is if you in fact can certify to that, and you say that we won't have access to those books through the digital content through the website, why would you put books like that in the physical content in the library that you would not allow through digital access? Doesn't make sense to me that you would put physical copies in for the things that you would digitally filter off. One last thing in that regard, and what was said is, well, we can't do anything about digital access to Overdrive. As I read the Overdrive requirements, or what they say they do, they said Overdrive staff members work with each library and school to customize their digital collection for their specific community. I ask, is Overdrive doing that for our community? Specifically for the community of Fremont, specifically for the content that's representative of our community, that the community would want it to be. If we're not doing that, one has to ask why not. Other communities have done so. I would encourage Fremont to explore that as well. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street. I'm not here to beat anybody up about anything or make too many complaints. My one issue is back in 2022, you addressed and had discussion about the south area of town and some of the flooding that Hazelbrook endured. And that's the area of structural components and Bertram's and Gavilon Group, et cetera. There's been no update on that status. There's been no action. I can appreciate doing flood drainage studies. If it's adopted, that'd be great. However, when you're addressing flooding, look at the internal aspect of Fremont. You have the Rawhide Creek that still needs cleaning out, and you're going to be addressing that with the Elkhorn Township. However, what about the Platte Township and that area? What about the areas that thread in through our neighborhoods that have not been cleaned up, not just for a year or 2 or 3? There's been a lot of complaints about the area along Fifth Street, that little, I don't know, concrete canal area along the city park area, and how it has gotten nasty and smells and reeks of very stale, stagnant water. It smells like raw sewage at different times of the year. What about along Luther Road? You're building a beautiful new school. You're putting up great trails. Address some of your flooding issues, because the safety of the public has to be adhered to. And they need to know that you care enough to address some of the flooding concerns that could be a matter of just cleaning out ditches and addressing something that's been on the books for years that was discussed last year. 2022 is the last discussion with Hazelbrook. That was to be addressed, and it still hasn't. I would ask that you, when you're going through your next several topics coming on the agenda, that you take that into consideration. That is still on the table. That's the interior of Fremont. There's a building allowed to be built. It was required to be built above the base flood elevation by at least a foot, and it was, but to the detriment of neighboring properties. And now they flood. Please address it. Thank you.
Okay, time is 7 o'clock. That will close public comment. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll go ahead and open up the Board of Equalization meeting. The Opens Meeting Act is on the back wall next to the agendas. This time we'll have roll call.
Please vote for roll call. Seven council members are present, Mayor.
Item 1 on the agenda is resolution 2023-196 levying a special tax and assessment in the amount of $305.38 against 249 West Washington, pay the costs of weed and debris removal and assessment.
Thank you, Mayor. This item is for a property cleanup. There is an additional $20 fee for both the cost of filing and releasing the item. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you may have about this item.
Questions for our clerk on this item? Okay. Comments from the public on this item? Okay. If there's no additional comments, I would take a motion. Councilman Vaughn. Motion to approve. Councilman Sukram.
I'll second.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Item 2 is resolution 2023-197 levying a special tax and assessment in the amount of $423.94 against 1939 North Broad Street to pay the costs of weed and debris removal and assessment.
Thank you, Mayor. This is an additional property cleanup, same as the prior item. I asked the city to take action to approve, and we will file the assessment.
Okay, thank you. Questions for our clerk on this item? Any comments from the public? Seeing no additional comments, take a motion. Councilman Vaughn. Motion to approve. Councilwoman Ganem.
Second.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Take a motion to adjourn the Board of Equalization meeting. Councilman Jensen.
Make the motion to adjourn.
Councilman Sukram.
I'll second.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
We are adjourned. I'll go ahead and open up the city council regular meeting. The time is 7:04. The Opens Meeting Act is posted on the rear wall next to the agendas. This time we'll have roll call for the city council meeting.
Please vote for roll call. 7 council members are present, Mayor.
Okay, tonight, for my comments, I'd like to recognize 3 individuals for their service to the city of Fremont. First, we have Todd Ellison, 30 years of service. Todd started with the city of Fremont as a water and sewer service worker in 1993. He transferred to a utility equipment mechanic 1 in 2014. He recently got promoted to utility equipment mechanic 2 in 2023. Brad Nathan, 10 years of service. Brad started with the city of Fremont as a wastewater plant operator 1 since 2013. Then he got promoted to wastewater plant operator 2 in 2015. And John Cromie, 10 years of service. John has been with the city of Fremont as a wastewater plant operator 1 since 2013. Then he got promoted to wastewater plant operator 2 in 2016. So I want to thank Todd Ellison on 30 years of service, Brad Nathan, 10 years of service, and John Cromie, 10 years of service for their loyal dedication and service to the city of Fremont. Okay, that'll conclude my comments for tonight. We will move on to item 1, is a motion to adopt the current agenda for the August 29th, 2023 regular meeting. Councilwoman Ganem.
Moved.
Councilman Jensen.
I'll second.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Moving on to public hearings, item 2 is resolution 2023-198, recommending approval of a Class D liquor license application of Taylor Oil Company doing business as Taylor Quick Pick number 2 at 2250 North Claremore Avenue in Fremont, Nebraska, 68025.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As the mayor said, this is a Class D license. Notice of the public hearing was published on August 17th in accordance with state statute. And we received positive recommendations from the police department and the planning department. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you may have regarding the application.
Any questions for our clerk on this application? Okay, seeing none, I will open the public hearing. Any comments from the public? Seeing no comments, I'll close the public hearing. Any additional comments from council? If there are none, I would take a motion. Councilman Sukram,
I'll make a motion on resolution 2023-198.
Councilwoman Ganem,
second,
cast your votes.
The motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Item 3 is resolution 2023-199, recommending approval of a Class C liquor license application of Woods Wines and Wares LLC doing business as Wine Experience at 415 North Main Street in Fremont, Nebraska, 68025.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Again, and as the mayor stated, this is a Class C liquor license. It also was noticed for public hearing tonight on August 17th. And we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding this application.
Any questions for our clerk? Okay, seeing none, I'll open the public hearing. Seeing no comments, I'll close the public hearing. If there's no additional comments from council, I would take a motion in regards to this item. Councilman Jensen,
I have no additional comments. I'll make the motion to approve resolution 2023-199.
Councilman Sukram,
I'll second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Moving on to the consent agenda, all items in the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the city council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or a citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda by council or staff?
Mr. Mayor, we have two items that need to be removed by staff, item number 8 and item 15. For some updates.
Okay. Are there any other items from the city council? Seeing none, any items from the public? Okay, seeing no other items, I would take a motion to approve the consent agenda. Items 4 through 7, 9 through 14, 16 through 22. Councilman Vaughn.
So moved.
Councilman Von Baron.
I'll second.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Item 8 is the resolution 2023-201 approving payment to the commissioner on accreditation for law enforcement CALEA organization to cover 1/2 of the CALEA assessment fees. We need a motion to receive. Councilwoman Ganem,
move to receive,
Councilman Sukram,
Second.
cast your votes to receive.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Thank you. Do we have a Lieutenant Watts? You can ready. You can address the council.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. I'm Ed Watts, WATTS. I'm a lieutenant with the Fremont Police Department. Does anybody have any questions before I begin or?
What you just want to explain the report we just
Yes, sir.
received?
The City of Fremont Police Department, we're seeking accreditation through CALEA, which is an international organization for credentialing law enforcement agencies. We applied for a CALEA agency support program grant that waived the initial fees of $11,450. We were approved for that grant. When we were notified that we were approved of the grant, we were told that we owed half of the initial assessment fees which I simply incorrectly read as $5,500. So we put in a staff report resolution for the mayor to authorize the signature to allow us to pay CLIA $5,500 in initial assessment fees. After rereading the material, I realized I simply, it was a reading comprehension mistake on my part. The $5,500 is the full assessment fee. We owe them half, which is $2,750. So I've amended the staff report, the resolution, and I'm asking for approval for the mayor to sign so that we can pay CLIA $2,750 in initial assessment fees.
Okay. Thank you. So this resolution we received just updates that change.
Yes, Mayor.
Essentially. Yep.
Yes.
Okay, any questions for Lieutenant Watts? Okay. I don't see a resolution number on here, Tyler. On their side. Okay. Then I would, Councilman Vaughn.
Motion to approve as amended.
Okay. Councilwoman Ganem,
second,
cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, council members.
Okay, moving on to item 15, resolution 2023-205, authorizing the mayor to sign the renewal agreement for GIS data maintenance services to Geocom Inc.
Mr. Mayor, council members, I'm Shelley Hilgerland, 911 Director. In my staff report, I stated that the Nebraska Public Service Commission required PSAPs to use certain GIS data providers. I've just recently found out that requirement is no longer in effect. However, there are a limited number of companies that specialize in providing GIS data for 911 use. Geocom is the provider of our software that manages the mapping for 911 calls. By using the same vendor, we are able to ensure that the data displayed for the dispatchers is accurate and reliable. Discrepancies are minimized, and we are provided with timely updates. Geocom also provides services for surrounding counties, allowing seamless mapping across the jurisdictional boundaries. For these reasons, I would ask that we could still consider Geocom a sole source vendor for our GIS data and remove the third whereas statement from the resolution that was in the packet.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, any questions for staff on that? Okay. I'd take a motion to amend to remove the whereas statement that's been mentioned. Councilman Jensen,
I'll make the motion to amend statement.
okay, Councilman Von Baron,
I'll second.
okay, motion to amend. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Thank you.
I'd take a motion as amended. Councilman Jensen,
I'll make the motion to approve resolution 2023-205 as amended.
Councilman Sukram,
I will second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Moving on to unfinished business, is ordinance 5651 for approval of utility salary ordinance. This would be for a second reading.
Mayor, City Council, Jennifer McDuffie, Director of Human Resources. This is the same ordinance that we discussed last 2 meetings ago. This is for the utility side of the organization. The IBEW contract provides for a 3% increase. We're also proposing a 3% increase for non-union classifications. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Questions? Thank you. Comments from the public on this item?
Brad Yerger, 2318 East Fifth. Oh, excuse me. I don't want to speak on this item. Next item.
Okay. Any other comments on this item? Any additional comments from council? If there are none, I would take a motion. We'll hold second reading. Councilman Jensen,
Make the motion to hold second reading of ordinance 5651.
Councilman Sukram,
I'll second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor. An ordinance of the city of Fremont pertaining to pay plan for officers and employees, repealing ordinances and all other ordinances and parts of conflict, ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for publication in pamphlet form and providing an effective date on second reading.
Okay. Item 24 is ordinance 5652 for approval of the government salary ordinance. This would be for second reading.
Jennifer McDuffie, Director of Human Resources. This is the city side of the organization. The fire and AFSCME contracts again have a 3% increase. We are recommending a 3% increase for all non-union classifications. FOP is still in progress. Fingers crossed, we will have that updated on the third and final reading. I will know in a few days, hopefully. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions for staff? Thank you. Mr. Yerger?
Brad Yerger, 2318 East Fifth Street. My question to the council and to HR, and you can choose to discuss it amongst yourself as you feel necessary, but in looking at that ordinance, as we look further into the agenda tonight, when we get to some budgeted headcount changes and the like, I don't see in the current ordinance being proposed a position for zoning administrator. And if you're approving the pay scales that are going to go into the budget for the cost of living increases, et cetera, one would think that maybe you'd want all the job titles that you might need coming up in your budget as well. So if that was an oversight or if I missed it, apologies, but otherwise it would seem like maybe you need to be thinking about adding a job title before you get to third reading on this ordinance. Thank you.
Any additional comments from the public on this item? Okay. Additional comments from council? If there are none, I would take a motion to hold second reading. Councilman Vaughn?
Motion to hold second reading.
Councilwoman Ganem,
Second the motion.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor. An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska pertaining to pay plan for officers and employees, repealing ordinances on all other ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for publication in pamphlet form and providing an effective date on second reading.
Okay, moving on to item 25 is ordinance 5650, adding Article 12, natural gas system in Chapter 3 and removing Chapter 10, Article 9, SEC 10-903. This would be second reading. Go ahead.
Mayor, City Council, Jeff Shanahan, Utility Manager. As this is the second reading, as was mentioned, as we go through the city code, we noticed that there was not a section for natural gas under the department, so we created that section. And then in Chapter 10, there was a section that referred to natural gas as a franchise agreement in the city. So we're asking that that be removed. So this is the same item that we saw last meeting. Take any questions?
Any issue to move this to third and final if
No.
Okay. Any questions for our utility general manager on this item? Okay, comments from the public? Seeing none, any additional comments from council? If there are none, I would take a motion to hold second reading. Councilwoman Ganem,
I move we have second reading on ordinance 5650.
Councilman Sukram,
I'll second.
cast your votes.
The motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Have second reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, amending the city of Fremont, Nebraska Municipal Code, Chapter 3 by adding Article 12, natural gas system, and repealing Chapter 10, business regulations, Article 9, franchise and agreements, Section 10-903, franchise and agreements, natural gas, and all other ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance shall be in full force and effect. On second reading.
Councilman Jensen,
I'll make the motion to suspend the rules and move ordinance 5650 to a third and final reading at this time.
Councilman Sukram,
I will second that.
cast your votes.
The motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Okay, we'll have final reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, amending the city of Fremont, Nebraska Municipal Code, Chapter 3 by adding Article 12, natural gas system, and repealing Chapter 10, business regulations, Article 9, franchises and agreements, Section 10-903, franchises and agreements, natural gas, and all other ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance shall be in full force and effect on final reading.
Cast your final vote.
Ordinance is approved 7-0, Mayor.
Item 26 is resolution 2023-192 awarding the contract to Siemens Industry Inc. for purchase of a shelter aisle 15 kV switchgear.
Mayor, City Council, Jeff Shanahan, Utility Manager. This item was pulled from last week's and brought this week to provide some additional documentation on the contract. What this is this is a switchgear that will supply the 13-8 circuits that are leaving substation G once the transformers are installed. We'd approved those transformers a few meetings ago. This is the switchgear portion for that substation.
Questions for staff? Councilman Vaughn,
Do we have any risk of price increases if we would prolong this for 3 readings?
This is not an ordinance.
This is a one shot, okay.
Yep.
My bad.
Yep.
okay. Any other questions? Okay. Any comments from the public on this item? Okay, any additional comments from council? If there are none, I would take a motion. Councilman Sukram,
I'll make the motion to approve resolution 2023-192.
Councilman Vaughn,
And I will second.
cast your votes.
The motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Moving on to new business is resolution 2023-211 authorizing amendment to gas supply agreement with Central Plains Energy Project in connection with the reset of the available discount in CPEP's gas prepayment project and related matters.
Mayor, City Council, Jeff Shanahan, Utility Manager. In 2018, we joined a few other utilities, mainly MUD, in the CPEP 4 agreement for discounted natural gas. It had a reset period after 5 years. We're at that reset period right now. They've asked for a resolution to be approved by city councils of all the agencies that are part of it. The resolution does 3 things. One, it allows us to use a third party to secure the gas rather than going through the original sole source type thing. So we're going to take advantage of that and secure gas through a BP. The second thing it does is it extends the period. It would have been a 25-year term once you subtract the 5 years off. Talking to Goldman Sachs, they recommend that we extend it to the additional 5 years to keep it a 30-year bond rating. We can get a larger discount for those additional 5 years. And the third thing it does, it assigns an authorized agent for each entity to be able to sign the documents going forth as prescribed in the contract that was initiated in 2018. Those authorized agents would be the mayor or the utility general manager. The utility general manager has the ability to purchase natural gas on the markets through the municipal code.
Okay. Questions for staff on this item? Any comments from the public? Okay, seeing none, additional comments from council. If there are none, I would take a motion. Councilman Jensen,
Yeah, I'll make the motion to approve resolution 2023-211.
Councilman Von Baron,
I'll second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Okay, moving on is item 28 is ordinance 5653 adopting the 2023-2025 biannual budget statement termed the appropriation bill. This would be for first reading. So I'd like to open up on this item. Thank you all for being here, the city council, members of the public as well. Thank you for attending our last meeting as well, last Tuesday as we begin. This will be the first reading of the biannual budget. Earlier this afternoon, I sent out a press release to the city council outlining my budget recommendations. I would like to highlight those recommendations tonight. This budget focuses on 3 key areas. Number 1, lowering the city's property tax levy. Number 2, record investments into public safety facilities and roads. And number 3, quality of life. So I'd like to go into each one of these 3 points. First, the levy. And this will be an update from what was originally reported on, as the staff report did have some incorrect information that was reported on. So what I'm giving you tonight and also was included in that email is the correct information. So my 2024 proposed budget lowers the city's property tax levy by almost 9%. This brings a total levy decrease of 15% over the last 2 years. For example, in 2021-2022, the city's portion of the taxes for a home valued at $150,000 was $489. Because of the lower levy over the last 2 years, the proposed budget proposal will decrease it to $414, a savings of $75. As we look at our property tax, our certified property taxable value for the city, it increased to just over 2.4 billion this year compared to just under 2.1 billion in the previous year. So this is a 16.3% increase in taxable valuation within the city. I have listened closely to what Fremont residents have been sharing with me. They're very concerned about increasing costs due to record inflation, increasing gas prices, and escalating food costs. As our property tax base grows, my focus continues to be on controlling our spending, maintaining our strong financial position. This budget reduces the levy and still accomplishes our major initiatives within the city. This budget includes major public safety facility improvements, including a new police station and engineering for 2 new fire stations. Funding for these projects will come from a mixture of general fund reserves, sales tax reserves, and municipal improvement bonds, which will pledge future sales tax receipts collected for the purposes of public safety to pay back the bonds. This method of financing will have no impact on property taxes and will allow the city to move forward quickly on these important projects. This budget also includes adding 2 additional police officers in 2024, a community service officer in 2025. It also proposes adding an assistant fire chief in addition to the 6 firefighter positions added during the last budget cycle. So as you can see, public safety remains our top priority. In addition to wage increases, these facility improvements will help us attract and retain our dedicated first responders. It's worth the investment. The biannual budget includes a record $47 million in projects to improve streets, infrastructure, facilities, and drainage within the city, with many of these projects receiving state or federal grants to offset the cost to taxpayers. Highlights include, but not limited to, the Broad Street reconstruction, 23rd Street signal repairs, First Street overlay from Maine to Claremar, Street Department and Fleet Maintenance Building, Airport runway reconstruction, Railroad quiet zones, 19th Street Share the Road, Open Ditch rehabilitation, Johnson Lake expansion project, and the railroad and Claremar construction. This budget makes significant investments in maintaining and improving our roadways, drainage, and critical infrastructure within the city of Fremont. You expect efficient and safe roadways, and this budget makes record investments to set up our community for the future. Along with these investments in public safety and roads, this budget proposes key projects to advance the great quality of life in Fremont. This includes public transportation, downtown revitalization, library, parks and recreation, and trails. Many of these projects have received state, federal, and private dollars to help offset the cost to taxpayers. These highlights include the Fremont Transit Program, completion of the Key Memorial Library expansion and renovation project, the Fremont and Elkhorn Valley Railroad Fever Rails to Trails project, a splash pad at Clemens Park, the resurfacing of Van Anda tennis courts for pickleball courts, John C. Fremont Amphitheater, multiple new park restrooms, downtown archways, and parking lot improvements. As Fremont continues to grow, it is important that we provide excellent amenities and quality of life, and these improvements benefit all citizens and bring that sense of place to our hometown. In the Fremont Department of Utilities, key investments are budgeted to keep up with increasing demand and system reliability. These include adding additional transformers to keep up with increasing electrical demand, developing a horizontal well at the well field, and engineering to add an additional peak shaving plant to keep up with natural gas demand. As I said last week, the Fremont Department of Utilities continues to be one of the best run utilities in the state. We continue to pride ourselves on delivering cost-effective and efficient power, water, and gas to our over 15,000 customers. And this budget accomplishes that. In closing, I want to thank city staff and department heads for their hard work and staying within our budget and maintaining our strong AA- financial bond rating with Standard & Poor's. I also want to thank them for their teamwork and conducting listening sessions with the city council, which guided this proposal tonight. This budget represents our mission and our core values of fiscal responsibility, public safety, and quality of life. And as our community continues to grow, Fremont is in a strong financial position to address our future needs. So I want to thank the citizens of Fremont for making this a great place to live, work, and raise a family. With this budget and the continuing improvements that we're making, we truly have a bright future in Fremont. But this time I'd like to turn it over to Jody Sanders, who will have additional comments.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to visit with you tonight about our budget. I do need to apologize. It was my mistake in the staff report where I had indicated that our valuation, or excuse me, that the levy was decreasing by 3%. It actually is decreasing by 3 cents for the just the general non-bonded levy. The decrease is actually an 11% decrease. So good news on that front. So it's just kind of a reorientation here. We are at the first reading of the appropriation bill. This is the second draft of the budget that you'll see. Kristen will go through the changes that were required. A lot of them were simple things like making sure that if we had a project that was being funded by a grant, that we were actually showing grant revenue. Those kinds of things we didn't have time to double check before you got the first round of the budget. So you'll see those changes come through. As the mayor indicated, we had an increase in our assessed value. But we listened to what staff had, or excuse me, what the city council had recommended, and that was to only limit our increase to the amount that was for the real growth, and that percentage was 1.269. And then we are allowed an additional 2% under the current statutes. So that's the way that we've brought forth this budget. Sales tax, we continue to see that coming in strong, as well as the Keno Fund. I think I mentioned that last week. And the utilities, we still are seeing some changes in some of our large customers that will have an impact on revenues in the next 2 years, as well as significant investment in the existing utility infrastructures, some of the projects that Jeff talked about last week. We've intentionally been a little vague on where we're at with what is budgeted for personal services, which includes wages and benefits, because we have for 3 of our union groups, we're in the second. This is the remaining 2 years of their 4-year agreements. We're, as Jennifer mentioned earlier, we're wrapping up the negotiations with the police. And so we're kind of keeping all of that kind of close to the vest at this point. So a few things to go over. General fund revenues. Oh, excuse me. This got put in the wrong place. This was the worksheet that I put together to show we had a 3 cent decrease in our levy from 23 to 24, but it actually ends up being an 11% decrease from one year to the other. The debt service fund, or excuse me, the levy went up 13%, went up 13%. But the total levy landed, as the mayor indicated, at about 9%. And you can see the calculations that we did just real quick in terms of what that would be on a home that was the tax on a home that was valued at $150,000. This is the revenue worksheet that you saw last time, updated just slightly for some of the transfers that I mentioned. This was a slide that I put together. This really didn't show it especially well, but this line that's nearly to the bottom, it's the last one here, the aid to cities. That's the amount that we get from the state for used to be called municipal equalization. But it's an area where we report what we are levying for taxes. They also receive the valuations from the counties, and they take a look and say, okay, cities and villages, are you doing all that you can to support the services in your community? And there are, unfortunately, small towns and villages where they don't even have the certified valuation necessary to support the operations of the city. And that's where this municipal aid comes in, or the aid to cities. So when we went through the process, and this graph goes all the way back, starts in 2010, and it shows the blue line at the top shows what our property taxes have been skating along here. We saw a fair increase in the 2017 to 2019 timeframe. I believe that was due in part to the decision to add some firefighters. One of the council members asked to have an additional 5-cent levy to pay for some additional police officers at that time. But you can see we had a good increase in our property tax request, but at the same time, our municipal aid, which is the red line here, our aid to cities has been just a nice, smooth line until we got into 2021, where the decision was made by council to provide property tax relief to our citizens. We were able to do that. And in fairness, this is not the property tax request, it's the amount that's collected for the actual years. So it's a little bit less descriptive because you can see how we have a dip here in what the property tax received was during that time. But look at the significant drop. We went from $880,000. The next year was $80,000. We've kept the property tax request and levy virtually the same the last few years. We are showing that increase that I talked about, 3.26% in 2024. Assuming we'll see a like amount of growth in 2025, I have in there as well another 3% increase. So you could see that we're just slightly going up a little bit. But in 2024, because our property tax did not rise with our valuations, the amount that we received went from 253,000 down to 135,000. So when we're making choices about what we're doing with the levy, there's more to consider than just, well, what's that going to do to an individual's taxes? Because in the long run, we still have the services that we need to provide, but there is a correlation there that I wanted to point out. Looking at our expenditures, this is showing how the city is using those funds for personal services, contractual services. Those are categories that are set out for us by the state and governmental accounting standards, those 4 buckets, if you will, and then transfers out. This is only for the general fund only. So you don't see typically a lot of money coming out of the general fund. The amounts that we have in these years, I believe a good deal of it was for the airport terminal building. We use some general fund reserves for that. I'll point out that we have 21 actual, 22 actual. I left the 23 budget in here so you could see what the 23 budget was, the 23 year-end estimate where we think we're going to come out, and then the 24 and 25 budgets there. So these are basically all the uses or expenses and transfers out, if you will, showing the split between capital and operations. And then comparing that to on the previous page where I was showing sources of revenue, I've added those lines into this to show if we're planning to spend reserves or if we're planning on bringing back reserves. So that last line, you can see that we had brought back 175,000 to the bottom line. And contributed to our fund balance. In 2022, we contributed another $1.2 million to our reserves. In 23, we budgeted to spend 6.8 million in reserves. But as a reminder, that was tied to the building of the police station, which hasn't started yet. So our year-end estimate shows us coming in at about 1.6 million of the use of fund balance. In 2024, we've talked about the various uses. The mayor commented on for the police building and for the Parks Department share of the street and parks building and the fleet maintenance shop. That we have listed as and budgeted for $12 million. You can see the amount of spend we have anticipated here at 11 million, almost $12 million. And then in 2025, we have $7.4 million that we're expecting to expend from our reserves. It's projected right now to leave us at about a $5 million reserve. And the minimum reserve we would need in our general fund in 2025 would be about $3 million. So we are spending the reserves that we've had completely, admittedly, but it's intentional to get some of these projects done that have been stalled for so long. This to me is an interesting chart. You probably can't read very well the legend at the bottom, so I'll just go through it briefly. This first cluster is 2021 actual numbers. The first column is the personal services, wages and the like. Contractual services is in the darker green. The short one is commodities. You can see across the board, that third one, we don't spend nearly as much in relation to the others. And then in 2021, you can see we spent about $2.5 million for fixed assets. That would be improvements, equipment, and these are all general fund spends. So it wouldn't include what you see in the street department, for example. But you can see that we have in 21 and then again in 22, a really short line on the amount that was actually spent for fixed assets. Our 23 budget, we had nearly $12 million budgeted. We're estimating that we're going to spend for fixed assets about $8.5 million. That goes up in 2024. So again, just kind of looking at the relativity between those individual graphs, you can see how much more we're investing in our fixed assets over the next couple of years. The other thing that jumps out, at least to me, is the 21 and 22 years are actuals, and you can see far and away, typically our personal costs are what really drive the city's budget. And I've said that many times. You're probably tired of me saying this. This chart I thought was kind of interesting. I went through an exercise where I took each department's expense, their operating expense only. This is just for operations. This takes out the impact of capital. But just from an operating budget standpoint, where do we spend the dollars? So you can see oh, it didn't show up there. Any ideas why?
Showing up on your screen, Jody, I try to refresh over here.
It's, can you put it up on yours?
Up on your screen.
Yeah. I have the next chart up.
It's included in the agenda packet.
There we go. All right. So you can see the police takes up about 37% of the general fund. And this is the amount that we're spending on property tax, to give you an idea of how much of the levied amount that we receive for property tax, what departments receive that support. That takes into account for the fire department. The fire department we have spend less because we have about $700,000 that comes in annually for the ambulance services that we provide. And so this number is, that their revenue, if you will, the amount that they collect for that purpose, it's reduced by that amount. And we're at about 18% for the fire. Parks is the next category at 8.7%. Library is at 7%. And again, these are for just our operating costs. We have a lot of the shared services over here for information technologies. In the gray, that's at 5%. Engineering is 4.75%. And it goes down the list. Let me see. So on a percentage basis, Ronan Pool only takes up 0.19% of the city's levy. So while it's not a moneymaker, the amount that it has for general fund support is fairly limited once you take out the fixed asset cost of those. So I find this kind of an interesting exercise when people are concerned about how we're spending their tax dollars. I think this shows clearly and loudly that we are definitely spending those tax dollars for public safety. The sales tax fund, I didn't have a chance to go over that with you all at the last meeting, so I thought it was a good opportunity to go through that with you. The amounts across the top here are the total amounts that we expect to receive over the years. You can see that we've had steady growth here. Our 2023 budget has another $900,000 added to it, or excuse me, not 900,000, $100,000 added to it. So we're budgeting to kind of continue that trend. The sales tax is divided into 5 buckets, if you will. The first one is for public safety. It actually gets 2 pieces. One is from the sales tax that was in the half-cent sales tax that was imposed under LB 840, where it receives 1/3 of 0.5% of the tax. And then I believe it's, Kristen, do you remember it's 40 or 60%? It's 60%, isn't it, for sales tax from the half-cent sales tax that we get, that we split between public safety and streets? Or infrastructure, rather. I'm putting you on the spot. I'm sorry. That's fine. But it's a split. So there's actually two avenues that we receive revenue from. The amounts that you see here, we really don't have a lot of expense. The rental house expense that you see here is related to the house that was purchased adjacent to the fire station. There was one that we purchased that we demolished, but then there was the one on the corner that we're still renting. And so you can see that we're showing a little bit of rental income. I'm budgeting as if we're going to not be getting revenue in 2025, but it will completely depend on what the city's plan is for the fire station moving forward. And so out of an abundance of conservatism, I didn't include rental income or frankly expense for that house. The 2 intercity transfer pass-through accounts that you see here, the first line is for public safety, a transfer for public safety over to the general fund to support the police and fire departments directly. We've eliminated that line in the 23 budget, 24 and 25, because we know we have those capital needs that are coming. And then you can see how it plays out for 24 and 25, where with the improvements and the equipment that we're anticipating, we're going to see a significant pull on our reserves in that sales tax fund. But you can see that we'll still have a $2.4 million fund balance in the public safety sales tax at the end of 2025. Those municipal improvement bonds that the mayor mentioned, just a conservative estimate on the principal and interest payments required would be in the neighborhood of $2 million a year. And you can see that we're already collecting more than that in this fund, assuming the LB 840 tax is renewed for another 10 years. It did it again. I must be talking too long. Okay, now we have the other two more of those categories. One is for infrastructure. As I mentioned, that's an amount that comes in from one of the half-cent sales tax. The amounts that come in for infrastructure are basically to pay for drainage improvements in the community, as well as when this was initially passed, it was to pay for a sewer interceptor and a water interceptor. And those bonds were paid off quite a while ago. We try to spend the amount in this 2056 category. Drainage projects, it will be helping us pay for the city's local match of drainage projects that we have coming up. But you can see that we have a healthy reserve there. It's actually one that we may consider taking a look at the purpose of those to see if we might be able to send some over for the sewer fund to help pay back those bonds that we have on the wastewater treatment plant. But just at an initial glance, I think legal has suggested that we would need council action to accomplish that. The next section is an entire 1/2 cent is brought in for property tax relief. And as to the extent possible, we try and keep that a very low balance, because it's designed for property tax relief, not for some kind of investment fund. And so we try and keep that fund balance as low as possible to keep the funds moving and provide the citizens with the property tax relief they need. The fourth section is the street improvement section. With the somewhat aggressive schedule that Justin has put together in the street fund, the street improvements, as well as the work that's being done on the street department building itself, you can see that we are looking at we think we're going to end up with about $5 million in that fund at the end of the year. And like so many other things, it's not correcting streets if it's sitting in the bank. And so we have intentional spends of 2.8 million and then almost 1.4 in 2025. This one's looks a little bit more complicated, but it is the LB 840 piece. It's the economic development. It's the other 1/3 of 0.5% that comes in. We are anticipating in the 2024 budget, we have budgeted to use the remaining amount that had been dedicated by the council for the tech park improvements to finish that out. And then as well as we're budgeting to assume that we'll pay the amount back to the state. We don't know for a fact that we'll have to yet. There's still time until April, but I thought it prudent to go ahead and show that spend out. But we will, at the end of 2025, assuming the tax continues at the rate that it is, we would have 4.6 million in reserves in that fund available for applications that come in. And then this is just a very brief recap of all of the different revenues and expenditures, not broken down by category, but the amounts that would be in total. So you can kind of see where we're at in terms of the total fund balance. Ultimately, over the course from 21 to 25, we're really spending down about $2.1 million. This last line here closely approximates the line up here. It's just to double check that we've got the right amounts in the proper categories, that it agrees with some rounding issues to what the total was that we set out from the beginning. A little comment on some of the buildings that we're looking at. Just as kind of a reminder, after the 2019 floods, pretty much all of the city facilities south of the Broad Street Viaduct had to be repaired, replaced. We purchased a construction trailer to replace the hut that's down at the waste transfer station, by way of example. We also had to refurbish the parks shop and the forestry shop once the area had been cleaned out, as well as Moeller Field, in order to prepare them for their the Moose first game. And that was cutting it kind of close, but those investments were in 2019. We remodeled our historic city auditorium. That project was completed in 2021. We had a new airport terminal building completed in 2022, which highlights a key entrance into our community. We're currently underway the Key Memorial Library expansion that's expected to be completed before January of 2024. That brings us to the street department, parks, forestry, and fleet maintenance building. Right now, what you see in the budget, it's proposed at a much more modest, if $12 million can be modest, but $12 million for construction planned in 2024, probably the fall of 2024, I believe. Right, and it goes into spring of 25, right? Yeah. And then the police station building proposed right now at $17,250,000. We would expect that construction of that would begin in 2025. The two new fire stations that have been proposed, we would be looking at starting the engineering for that, and you see that in the 25 budget year, engineering to get started on those two new fire stations, expecting construction in 26 and 27. The idea that was presented by Shive Hattery was that we would build them simultaneously so that we would then be able to move out of the old station and just into the two new stations. That's open for debate, obviously. That's down the road quite a ways, but that was what was proposed by Shive Hattery, the consultants that identified the areas in town where we needed those locations. And then I realize I've misspelled athletic, but a turf facility that's being proposed for 2026. That is something that could be funded. The bonds that would be issued could be funded with turnback sales tax. Due to the passage of LB 39, there was some conversation recently that those are not those athletic turf facilities or athletic arenas need to be publicly owned, not privately owned or owned by nonprofits. So it might be, if we're looking to do the option of the turnback sales tax, that would be something that we could consider when we're talking about how we might pay for those bonds. But anything that is in 26 and longer out, you'll see it on your capital improvement plan, but it is not contemplated in the budget. The only overlap that you see from that perspective would be the engineering costs for the fire department. We really want to get that started, kind of keep the momentum going on the buildings. And any questions? I went through that a lot, pretty fast.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the council this time? Councilman Von Baron.
Yeah, Jody, it's this feels like cramming for a final exam, the second week into a course. So I'm suffering from information overload on these. What could you help us and maybe just lay it out in chart form? I'm having my trouble getting my head around bonds, where they go, exactly when they go, sources of revenue coming back in. I know it's in there somewhere. And could we get just kind of a concise, maybe a one sheet summary of where that goes? Or is it in there and did I miss it?
So in the detail that you see that was included in the packet for city bonds, you'll find that in the those we're going to put those in the sales tax fund. So in the sales tax fund revenue sheets, well, even the
So are virtually all the bonds expected to be paid for with sales tax revenue receipts?
No.
Okay,
No.
So that's-
This, you would find this under the sales tax fund is 20, Fund 11, 2055. And then there's an account, oops. There's an account called bond proceeds that shows the 10,744,000 that we're looking at for public safety bonds. It's to the far left column, or excuse me, far right column, right above the pink line.
yeah, I just can't see it from my seat, so I've been having trouble following.
It would be, it's also in your packet. I'm trying to, I apologize because I wrote it down at one point, what the page number of the packet was. Because this is included in the packet that you received.
Okay.
As part of the.
Yeah, on
Yep.
the screen, it's just,
Sure.
yeah, trying to go through it on the screen is just almost impossible even ahead. Okay, very good. Oh,
Okay.
excuse me. That
And
packet.
then
Okay,
on,
my error.
for the utilities.
Okay.
Then you would find those on those, what we all call the budget cover sheets. Where there's one for each of the utility funds. And so again, those would be budgeted in 2025.
Okay.
And it's down toward the bottom, there's a section that talks about the cash flow analysis. At the bottom, it talks about basically cash in. And there is a line that says other, and in parentheses, it says bonds, kayak, that kind of thing. And those utility bonds that are included, I do have a list of them. I think it was in the ones that I sent you, but if memory serves, Jeff, you want to, do you want to chime in on that?
Well, I can, if it's in there, I can address it even in a private conversation. Rather
Sure.
than take public time right now. That's fine.
Sure. But they're on those budget cover sheets and down along the bottom, it's just before you get to the cash balance, just like the line or two above it, there's a transfers in kayak, it says other. Kayak is
Okay.
CAIC.
Okay. The other question was, I noticed the turf facility, we have rated as an A priority.
Mhm.
And yet police or the fire station is a B priority. How does the turf facility rank ahead of the fire facilities?
So I'm looking at department heads because they're the ones that put that designation on there.
No, I understand.
Sure.
I assume there's a reason for it. I just can't sort through it.
It is a need within the community right now is having an indoor playing field, whether it be for soccer.
I just want to be clear, those markings were by department heads inside the CIP plan. So it's within the department. By no means are we saying tonight that that is more of a priority as
Okay.
police and fire.
That's
So I want to be very clear on that.
Yes,
So
I would agree.
we will,
Thank you.
Yeah.
and that's not even really in this budget. It's just to kind of, at this point, it's in the capital improvement plan, which is outside of this budget. So that discussion and debate can happen way after what we're doing tonight.
Very
Right.
good.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Kristen is queued up to go over the changes that were included in your packet showing that how we moved from what you saw last Tuesday to this Tuesday. Did anybody have any questions about those, or do you want her to go through those individually and talk those through? Okay.
Councilman Vaughn.
Just a quick comment. You heard the term listening sessions and those actually took place. And I want to applaud the mayor and city staff for holding those listening sessions, listening to the council and letting us articulate the needs of the community. And we're spending a lot of money in the next few years, but we have kicked this can down the road for decades. And this is all long overdue. It's never going to get any cheaper. Time to act is now. We're growing this time.
Okay. Any other comments at this point from the council? Okay. Comments from the public at this point? Okay, seeing no comments, additional comments from council. Again, this would be for the first reading. Councilman Jensen.
Yeah, I'll just pair what Councilman Vaughn said, that we really appreciate. It's time to get these things done. I know it's really easy to kick it down the road and not have to spend the money, but it's time to spend the money. We're growing and we need to address our needs and prepare for the future.
Councilwoman Ganem.
Yes, I think the budget together to show a strong financial stance that we have. And I believe we're doing our part. I just wanted to make it clear that actually the city gets about 16% and the school district gets about 65%. And then you have the county getting about 12%. And so we're not taking the largest bite from the property taxes. And I feel we've made it clear that the city has only 16%. And we've also made it clear that we've taken the leadership role in reducing the levy. And I'd certainly hope that our other two counterparts will look at their budgets as well.
Councilman Von Baron.
Yeah, just follow up. I'd like to echo that. I certainly appreciate your priorities, Mr. Mayor. Holding the line of property taxes. To me, one of the measures of good government is whether the government is living better than the people. And clearly with the other taxing entities, there has been frankly just very little, reasonable restraint, but we've taken the lead and it's an example that should be noted. I think the other thing that I'm pleased with is that we're finally making use of our reserves. There was a question in my uninformed mind at one point. I was told that we could not do that significantly without jeopardizing our bond rating. So it's encouraging to see that we're finally using those reserves, putting them to use while still maintaining our bond rating. So I appreciate that balance.
Any other comments from the council? Councilwoman Ganem.
I'm thinking of our timeline is so short. I think we should give consideration if we have any resolutions to change the budget or to certainly have time to ask, is that we do that on our second reading so that by the time the third reading comes, we have a closer or a more accurate picture of what we actually will need and what where we actually are.
Yeah, and I'll just close it by also echoing, I appreciate the comments tonight. There was a lot of time put into the listening sessions to understanding from the elected officials what this budget needed to have in it and the priorities. And really tonight, I'm very confident that the priorities of the community and of the elected officials are represented within this budget. And it does those things and allows us to accomplish a lot of projects by also being very good stewards of what of your tax dollars within the community. And I thank the finance staff for putting all this together. Obviously it's not easy when you're looking at the different buckets and how sales tax, property tax, and all the revenues on the city side and the expenses and how that impacts all the reserves in those accounts. And so, and then the creative and looking at really sales tax right now is what's our increases in sales tax is allowing us to do a lot of these things. And that, continue, people are traveling into Fremont and spending more money and is helping, and that is again contributing to why again we're able to do a lot of this within the budget, is what's going on in the sales tax fund. So with that being said, if there's no other comments, I would take a motion to hold first reading. Councilman Jensen.
I'll make the motion to hold first reading of the budget.
Councilman Sukram.
I will second that.
Cast your votes.
A motion carries 7-0, Mayor. An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska to adopt the budget statement to be termed the appropriation bill to appropriate sums for necessary expenses and liabilities and to provide for an effective date on first reading, Mayor.
Item 29 is received 23rd Street Traffic Signal Improvement Strategy Final Report from JEO and discuss how to move forward with construction and its recommendations.
Good evening, Justin Zetterman, Director of Public Works.
Maybe you should just walk around.
I feel like Bob Barker. a little. But trying to save time. So before you tonight, we're presenting the study that JEO Consulting Group has completed on the signals for 23rd Street. As you may recall, that this project started out as looking at what are the needs of the 23rd Street corridor? How can we improve these signals? How can we improve traffic flow? And looking to do that over a 5-year period for the 9 different locations where we have signals. This started out with them inventorying everything we had, and maybe this is a theme. What they found was the equipment is outdated. Most of that was put in by the state when it was Highway 30, and it was built in the 1980s. And we've gone through multiple generations of new equipment technologies, and it's just beyond its lifespan. And so after they did that, they came up with recommendations of what we could do to improve this. We met with multiple suppliers just to get ideas of what options we had out there, what we could get to solve the problems. And from that is how they came up with their recommendations. There were 3 recommendations that they looked at. One was complete replacement. And that is just fiscally impossible for us. That would be needing to spend about $4.5 to $5 million over the entire corridor just because of the expense of the poles and the mast arms and all that additional work. And so the recommendation that they have and what I have put forth in the new budget is about $1 million more than what the original project set out to spend of $1.2 million roughly in construction expenses. And I'm proposing to do that over 5 years. They're listing it out as a 9-year program, but I think with monies available and just dragging this out over 9 or 10 years doesn't give the citizens the benefits on that corridor that we want to see and we want to see soon. And so the recommendation that's in the current budget has
the repairs and replacements to Bell, Luther, and Clarkson in this coming year. Bell Street obviously is our busiest and most accidents occur there. It also, you don't have to slow down to see the rust on the cabinets and things like that. It's in rough shape. Luther, we have the new school coming, so a priority of getting that improved, getting the left turn signals that the traffic impact study recommended in place. And then Clarkson is another one that is been difficult. Our Department of Utilities handles all the streetlights because they have the electricians and they do a fantastic job, as I mentioned in the staff report. If you were out there last week on Tuesday, you would have found you couldn't get around because the signal just stopped functioning and went into flash. And it took several hours to figure out the problem is. And when you can't get new equipment to replace what's there because it's outdated, it just becomes harder and harder to maintain. So that $2.2 million project will replace most all the electronic equipment, run new wiring under the ground. So we have something that we know will last there, but would not address the poles. To address the poles, also in the budget, we will be looking into hiring someone to do a study of all of our poles throughout the city, not just on this corridor. Obviously, the last thing we want is a mast arm falling down in traffic. And when our poles are all in that 50+ year range, they're past what would typically be considered their useful life. And it's just the wind and the bouncing, it just stresses the steel over time. So we will be looking into that. And then hopefully we won't find that we have large amounts of work we need to do to replace those throughout town. But at least we'll know where we need to spend the money. And the budget also does have a plan to start a traffic signal annual improvement plan similar to the pavement rehab, so that as we find those problems, as we know that the pedestrian signal by Howard School, one of the lights just blew out this spring, literally, and we couldn't get the new bulbs immediately. We didn't have any, and it was held with duct tape because that's what we could do. But our guys got it back up and they got it back running as soon as possible, and that's what they've been successful at. But we need to move beyond that. So a couple other things in the study. They did look at a signal alternative for Bell and Yeager and 23rd, trying to combine it all into one signalized intersection. And as you can read in it, the recommendation is that is not the best option. It potentially could lead to less safe conditions, and certainly would lead to more delay, which is one thing that we don't want to see, and that's adding delay to the road where it doesn't need to be. And their recommendation is to continue to look for some solution to somehow tie the two together. And unfortunately, that's not going to be inexpensive. We have approached them all. They were not opposed to talking about it. Going forward, there were issues that would come up with doing that, just like everything else. But that, based on their study and their recommendation, would be the way forward. And then they also looked at whether or not an additional signal would be warranted at Deer Crossing, I believe it's the street there. And based on their study at this particular time and with the school opening, they don't see warrants being met to add another signal to the corridor. Certainly over time, if we see a lot more development in that area, then yeah, we'll want to take a look again and make sure things haven't changed. But that would be a $400,000 or $500,000 expense to put in a full light at that location. So we're holding off on including that in it at this time. And if anybody has any questions on it, I'd be happy to try and answer it.
And just to be clear, Justin, the $2.2 million repairs on the 23rd Street signals are included within the budget, right? So even though we're doing the study tonight, within the budget, they're included, right?
I have it in the 5-year projected.
Okay, in the
Yeah.
5-year.
So hitting 5 intersections in the first 2 years,
Okay,
getting our 3 biggest priorities out of the way immediately.
Bell, Clarkson and Luther.
Yeah.
Right.
Then picking up a couple more the following year and then
Okay.
within 5 years, getting this project done as the original goal was.
Councilman Vaughn.
I again want to thank you for finding a way to improve this corridor without spending $10 million in intersection. So good job. And I'm in support of table 2.
Thank you.
Councilman Von Baron.
I get to plead the rookie excuse, at least for this, or I think I'm probably just misreading it, but there's a reference there to staffing. We're not adding a person on staff just to manage traffic lights. Is that right?
No, that's in their long term.
Yeah.
We are addressing needs. There's so much more we could do. We could implement cameras. We could have the ability to remote in and work on them and do all kinds of additional things. And then maybe in the long term, that's something Fremont can do. And that would require at least having somebody that one of their jobs was to really manage that. But at this time, that is not something that they're recommending in the short term.
Okay. Yeah, the other thing was, and you've addressed it, I guess, I'm just having trouble without understanding the rationale, wrapping my head around the whole 23rd and Luther Road, with the new school out there. Volume of traffic is one thing. Teen drivers is a whole nother thing, having had a couple of those. So we don't anticipate any need for traffic regulation out there with the addition of the high school, the parents incoming, outgoing.
So at Luther Road, we'll be adding left-hand turn signals for northbound traffic on Luther.
Okay.
To get onto 23rd to help ease congestion coming out of the new elementary school. And so that the traffic study that was provided by the Deers recommended that, and our traffic engineer agreed with that. And so those will be some of the improvements you'll see at Luther, just to help ease that.
I'm just going by intuition on that one, but obviously that doesn't serve me well. So thank you.
I'm on my 3rd teenage driver. I get it.
Councilman Dinkins.
Quick question on one of the things in the table, 3.1 said the installation of GPS devices, which is going to help coordinate the signals along the whole route. Is that included in those numbers that we would do or no?
Yes. So basically that will just allow them to all maintain their clocks together so that they don't drift apart over time, which I'm not a traffic signal engineer, so I don't quite understand how or why that happens, but that is a fairly simple way that we can make sure that progressive signal timing that we put in would maintain itself.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Lathrop.
So maybe it was just a misprint in the study itself, but as I was looking through there, it referred to a Dillon parking lot up on Jaeger Road. Am I missing something there?
No, I clearly was missing something when I read the document and didn't respond back to them with comments because that was meant to be the mall parking lot.
Okay, thank you.
Good questions. Anything else from the council? Okay. Any comments from the public on this item?
Brad Yerger, 2318 East Fifth Street. I want to applaud the city for doing the study and fairly comprehensive in that regard. So I'll be brief because there were a few things in my review of this that if I were sitting in your seat, I'd want to understand better. I'm going to start with the Deer Crossing, the fact that you anticipate not putting a stoplight there for the new school that's going in out there. If you recall, sometime back, Councilman Legband suggested that we put a stoplight there for safety concerns and accidents. That's before you put the school traffic out there as well, and school bus traffic, who will be making left turns onto 23rd Street. Not right turns. A lot of those will be making left turns to take children home without stoplight protection. I think even though that may be that the study indicates that you don't need that now, you should think seriously about student safety as to whether or not that needs to be a priority from the get-go. Compounding that fact is that the school exit onto Luther was engineered to be on 22nd Street. I came before council and argued that that ought to be on 21st Street or 20th Street, so that you would enter that traffic further away from 23rd. I understand you're going to now be having turning lanes and turn signal lights at 23rd Street. That will be helpful. However, you only have a block to stack up traffic coming out of the school. If they want to go westbound, that'll be problematic. And you have in your schedule to widen Luther besides. So if you widen Luther after this all goes into effect, and you tie up the 22nd Street intersection coming out of the school for construction work, all traffic will exit either on Deers Parkway or 23rd Street, and neither one of those are traffic light protected. Certainly the 22nd Street spacing to 23rd Street stoplight is less than a quarter of a mile. So the argument that was made for you don't need one at Deers Crossing and a quarter mile is too short, I really think you ought to take a look at that closely for student safety reasons. The other one that was kind of a bit of a surprise, but not really, was the solution that they came up with, a recommendation they came up with at Bell Street. Then I urged the council, if you can't figure out a traffic light solution that works, and they didn't say they couldn't make one work, they said it was complicated, as I recall, not that it wasn't doable. But reverting back to having a significant build project and infringing on businesses like Village Inn or the mall or Wendy's or other businesses that are in the area to accomplish that, this council has hashed over multiple times and said that's a bad idea. Maybe you ought to take a harder look at whether or not Yeager Street North just needs to be closed, period, and get away from the problem altogether. And if you need to, think about moving the entrance that's there at the head of Bell Street into the mall area down in front of the where the other entrance is that is not stoplight protected, that goes into the mall today by the Hy-Vee gas station and goes to the movie theater as the main entrance, and you don't go into the mall parking lot head on from Bell Street. There are other ways to tackle the problem rather than building a $15 million street that would impinge on the businesses. So as you think about this study, which I'm glad you all did, and the rest of the work will be great, think about those issues with regards to student safety and overall public spending, because I'm pretty sure that the public does not want to spend the tens of millions of dollars that has been indicated would be necessary for the Bell Street intersection shift. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, any additional comments from council? The action tonight is just to receive the report. So. Councilman Jensen.
If there's no additional comment, I'll just make the motion to receive the report.
Councilman Sukram.
I'll second.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
I would take a motion to adjourn. Councilman Jensen.
Motion to adjourn.
Councilman Von Baron. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
We are adjourned. Have a good night, everybody.